You're listening to The Disconnect, a podcast created by people with anxiety for people with anxiety. Our goal is to destigmatize anxiety and mental health and show others they're not alone. And now, your host, Lindsey Jones and Austin Grant.
Welcome to The Disconnect. For those who have been following us, welcome back. If you're tuning in for the first time, we're so glad you're listening. Feels like literally forever since we've said that. But life's thrown quite a bit at us, I'd say, in the last, I don't even know how many months.
It's been a while.
Post-ish pandemic, still through it. Yeah, it's just felt like 150 years in one
What was
year.
it? What was the last, we looked, the last day that we recorded?
In February.
And it's
today
October.
Is October. It is October. Almost Halloween. That's exciting.
That's 8 months.
Spooky season.
That's 8 months ago.
Yeah, a lot has happened in 8 months. And, well, yeah.
But we're back, Jack.
We're back. We have wanted to get back into it for quite some time. Where I was like, hey, we need to bring that back. Hey, we should bring that back. Yeah. And then we're like, yeah, we do. And then we just kind of set a date, set a time. And here we are. Because it's meaningful. It's a piece to our life that we needed.
It is meaningful. I've missed this. And I don't know, I feel like we sunk so much time into it initially. And then we just kind of like stopped doing it for some reason. And, well, I mean, there's a pretty big reason why we stopped doing it.
There's reasons.
There are reasons. We'll get into that later. But I don't know, kind of like not doing it. I felt guilty because I'd sunk so much time into it. And I genuinely love to do it. And then like just kind of stopped. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you like were teaching yourself how to play guitar or something. And you sunk so much time and passion into learning how to play the guitar. And now as an adult, you don't do that anymore. And you kind of have this nostalgia around playing the guitar. And you wish you'd kept up with it. So.
Oh, you mean how I started playing baseball when I was 4 years old and I played through high school and played football through high school. And then I went to college and completely stopped.
Yeah, literally like that.
And here I am trying to play baseball again as an adult.
Exactly like that.
A real adult that pays taxes. I feel like once you start paying taxes, your body's like, nah.
A taxpayer.
Taxpayer is just, your body's so stiff because you pay too many taxes. And, like, my whole team is like, we're walking in canes and, like, walkers because we're so sore.
Would you say that being an adult is taxing?
Yes, it is taxing. Yes. That was great. That made my life.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But yeah, no, I feel you. That whole, yeah, it's exactly what I did. Sunk so much time. Sports when a kid, then grew up.
Yeah.
And, you know, the reality of becoming a professional athlete is yikes. And,
it's a little late for that. But it's never too late to get back into things.
And that's what we thought about the podcast.
Yeah.
So in today's episode, we're just going to be talking about what happened. Transparency.
It's a real interesting story. Shall we? Shall we get into it?
Always.
Where do you want to start?
Well, it all started when a mommy and a daddy... No, I'm just kidding.
That's too far.
Well.
Come back forward like a couple decades at least.
I'm not that old.
I mean, a couple decades is only like 20. 2 decades is 20. Deca is 10. Come on now.
Yeah, but I feel like a couple's like at least 3. But anyways.
A couple is 2.
We're letting our ADD take over.
The people in the comments are gonna harass you about it now.
But to start off, I mean, there's been a lot of change.
A lot of change.
I mean, yeah, we were in a pandemic. Well, we're still in
We're never getting out of this panini press, man. This panini's long overdone.
Surviving through. So, like, we moved to Phoenix. We kind of had that going, right? We kept the podcast going because we were like in a remote, recording from separate locations, making that work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It goes back to that whole time that you spent in it, right? We spent so much time invested into, making it work, and it just, I mean, to be completely honest, like we put so much pressure on it, because it started out as this idea. We were having these conversations 2 years ago now,
Mm-hmm.
right? 2.5 years now. Like, the look on your face.
That was so long ago.
Um,
When you say 2.5 years, that really just put it into perspective.
But like to give you just a quick snapshot, in the earlier episodes, it kind of talks about how we got started. But like, in a nutshell, we would have these 2.5-hour conversations at a coffee shop, talking through a pivotal point in my life, and as I was dealing through like the worst bout of anxiety I've ever dealt with. And then
so far.
And then we're like, why don't we start a podcast? We didn't know anything about it. Didn't know what that meant. Didn't know all that went into it. But like the more we started to research, the more we started to learn how to do it. Really wasn't that difficult. But then you're like, okay, well, we did it. We started it, right? And then it was just like, well, in today's day and age, it's not possible for a podcast. And, you see content creators and things like that all the time with podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Normally famous people go out and they start a podcast and it gets billions and billions of views and it's #1 on iTunes. And so I feel like it's easy to get in that mindset of like, yo, I want to be Joe Rogan.
Well, what is that? We watched a video the other day. I think somebody, I don't know, one of us linked it in the group chat of like, we as our generation have lost the ability to have hobbies because everything has to be a side hustle. Like everything has to make money for you in some way. And I think that's where we got lost, is we had all these expectations and we saw the potential and we saw like the growth and we had people telling us like that the podcast really helped them and we just wanted to like monetize it and do it all the time, and because that's really what it would take to do it all the time, is to monetize it, because you have to like quit your regular job and focus on doing it all the time,
which feels like a dream.
Yeah, it totally feels like a dream, and it's something that I would love to do someday, and I would love to see it take off, and I would love to have millions of people who could benefit from just hearing the weird conversations that we had and feeling less alone in what they're going through. But there's so much pressure to monetize it and to make it perfect and to make it something that everybody wants to listen to, and you want to make it to where you can grow your audience and all this other stuff, and it just puts too much pressure on it. It puts it in a place that it's not fun anymore, and it's not cathartic. It's not something that you do as a hobby. We were not getting what we had previously gotten from it, I think.
Yeah, because
then it becomes about content creation. It becomes about entertaining people. It's not about like helping people. It's
running
about
the social and growing an audience to listen to the podcast, because we're not Dwayne the Rock Johnson, who has 2 billion
who already has an audience,
followers and stuff, right? To where if he says he starts a podcast, everybody sees it, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to get in that mindset where we're like, yeah, we're texting it to friends and family, and that's what we really enjoyed, and like looking back, I mean, it like it's I like feel bad, that we kind of, we let it kind of get to that point where it,
mm-hmm.
became so focused there, right? But because I think it's like, like we've talked about, it's not possible in today's day and age, but if you try and force it, if you try and speed things up, if you try and make it happen, that's when we start to feel that pressure. That's when we start to feel like, oh, we have to do that. We have to do. We have to do. You know, we have X amount of episodes per month. We have social. We have all these different things. You know, and we were kind of dabbling a little bit with season 1, season 2. You know, and this, that, and the other. And you know, it was just kind of we were placing so much on it. You know, when the whole whole reason we did it in the first place was simply just take these long conversations we were having already and recording it on a platform for other people to hear and to relate to. You know, and because we're in this mental health crisis that's continuing to evolve, right? Trying to get help and see therapy and, you know, all of that. If something we're talking about, you know, our everyday life as everyday, ordinary taxpayers, right? You know, anything we can say or relate to, somebody out there listening is like, you know, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Like, it's that whole, that's why we're doing it, right? Simplifying it so, you know, so we got so caught up in it that we lost that touch. Right? And we were trying to do so much. I mean, don't get me wrong. We loved it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the giveaways, right? That was one of the funnest pieces to it. You know, we enjoyed helping people, kind of giving little gifts around the holidays and things like that. It was so fun to be able to do, but it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just felt super stressful, you know? And then it, like, became something, you know, because of our jobs and how those were going, like it was
or not going,
taking a toll, right? And it became, you know, it almost became like a second job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not to say again, right? I would enjoy something like this, you know, but at the same time, that's not why I'm doing it.
Right.
You know, we're not doing this podcast for those reasons, and it was, you know, it took having to kind of step away from it and to fully pull ourselves out of it to really center back on, like, look, this is a podcast, a place for people to listen to. I love podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're fun, you know, and, like, I think it's awesome. I mean, yeah, selfish reasons. I love hearing myself talk, obviously, but I think it's so cool, you know? And just, yeah, pressure was a lot. And over complication when we didn't need to.
Yeah, it put a lot of unnecessary pressure on it, and I think there's enough pressure in our lives right now, in general,
Especially
and just
right
like
now.
everyone's lives in general. So yeah, so we're bringing it back and we're taking the pressure off of it. So we're just gonna post episodes and see what happens. If people get entertainment out of it, great. If it's just us talking into a void and it just helps us feel better about the things that we're going through,
Great.
also great. But yeah, you know, and that's not to say that like we don't care about the people who are listening, because we do genuinely care about the people who are listening. But we have to take the pressure off of it, because if you know, turn it into something where you're constantly trying to get people to listen to you and you're trying to build an audience and stuff like that, it just it turns it into something that it's not. And that's not it's not what I want. I want to have good conversations. I want people to feel like this is a comfortable, safe space that they can feel, you know, heard, and that, you know, they can comment or reach out to us or whatever they want to do, to even, or not, you know, you don't have to reach out to us at all. If you just want to sit and listen to us yammer on about the weird shit that we have in our lives, that's fine.
Talk
and
about taxes and how we hate them.
Yeah, talk about corporate America. It's a great place. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I want to be able to help people, and I don't want to feel like I'm obligated to make money from this hobby.
Yeah.
So.
That's what we're doing. We're bringing back the hobby. Yes, society tells you, well, you got to optimize, right? You got your 9 to 5. Then from, 5 to 3 o'clock in the morning, you got to optimize and,
Yeah, what is that
efficiency. And you got to, the grind. Like, you're going to sleep when you're dead. And right after you get off your 9 to 5, right, regardless of your family, maybe spend a little bit of time, you feel this pressure to be like, what's your side hustle? Oh, you don't have one? Well, Susie, Sally, and Johnny, they got 7 of them. Did you see how much they're making? Like, it's so easy, you're scrolling through, and it's just like passive income, right? And you're just like, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
I want that, right? And so it's just that thing. I mean, I don't remember where I found that piece of where it was talking about people not having hobbies anymore because it all turns into like a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
Like this podcast is a passion project, right?
Yeah.
Hobby for sure. Like it's just kind of therapeutic,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it and that's hard for me, just personally, because like we've talked about in the past, go back to, I don't even remember what episode it was, the productivity gene. I think that, productivity gene on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're feeling like, not only do I feel like I have to be productive, but I feel like I have to be earning something because my time is worth money.
Right.
But it's like, well, not really.
Yeah.
Because your time is time. Whether you earn money or not, that's an hour. Like, that's an hour you're never going to get back. There's no amount of money in the world that's going to bring that hour back, or 2 hours, or 12 hours, or 57 hours.
Right. So, for those of you spending 57 hours at work,
A day.
who are only a day in your time machines, who are only supposed to be working 40 hours a week, stop it. Stop it now.
Drop, and roll.
Because, I mean, you're right. And I think you and I have had that conversation before of like, you'll only ever have the amount of time that you have now. You can make more money. You can get a better house. You can get a better job. You can get a better car. You can get a better whatever. But you will never be able to get more time. And if I'm spending my time doing things that are making me miserable, I don't want to do them.
Well, that's what I was doing. I was in a job after this last one, right, when we kind of stopped the podcast. I was making decent money.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time in my life. I was like, hey, this is awesome. But I was working like a dog.
Yeah.
It was like 55 hours, 60 hours a week. And I'm like, yeah,
Your
that's
dogs didn't know who you were. You came home and they were like, who's
I
this
didn't even
stranger
leave
in
home.
my house?
I was working remote. And I felt that way. Like, I feel like it's even worse. Like, yeah, it's nice working from home. But when you're working that much from home, you're like, yo, I need to, like, separate. And we talked about that, too, in the past, kind of beginning of the pandemic, of the whole distancing yourself from work, work-life balance in the house, when you're like, oh, I'm just going to roll out of bed, and boom, my laptop's right there. It's like, that's probably, probably not the healthiest, right? You want to give yourself some distance. Now that that's becoming more of the norm, and it's like, it feels foreign, it feels ancient to be like, yeah, I'm going to wake up, take a shower, get fully dressed, and make my breakfast, make my coffee, pack my lunch, get in my car, drive my car. I'm like, what?
Fully dressed.
Who does that? Like, where? Like, it feels...
Lucky if I put on real pants in a day.
It feels like old school, It feels like that's such a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, there's, still people that do that, right? Which, all the power to you. But, majority... I'd say majority of folks and companies and businesses are in that remote capacity, right? So it's that balance. But yeah, I was working so much. You can make all the money in the wine world. I'm not saying money's a bad thing, right? But if you ain't got no time to spend it, I had no time to spend. I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah. 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 I'm right there with you. Did we talk about yeeting our jobs?
No.
Yeeting is a professional term, by the way.
Look it up.
Look
Yeet.com.
to yeet. It is a verb.
Today's sponsor is Yeet.
But yeah, like, quitting jobs that make you feel miserable and taking a chance on yourself and not having a backup plan. So I think another big component to why we stopped doing the podcast was because the last place that we worked.
Well, so we last recorded the podcast in February, right?
Yes.
February was a
crazy month.
Pivotal
because
month.
that is the month that we, and I'll use this term again because it's one of my favorites, yeeted our jobs.
Now, I had a job lined up.
I did not.
So it was like we were both in a situation with a company that was not treating us well.
Oh, not at all.
And it was not healthy.
Nope.
And I had, gone through interviews and such, right? And I landed a job. And they were like, hey, we want you to start next month. So I was like, great. That's next month. Let's not have to work for a month, right? And so, yeah, I, handed my resignation in, and Lindsey did as well, except,
without a backup plan.
Yeah, and that was, for starters, that was like the first time in my life that I've, I think from the time I left to the time I started the new job, I had like a month. And I was like, yo, I had not taken a month. I hadn't even taken a week since entering the workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
From graduating to working full-time to master's to this. And I was just like, that's what caused my anxiety in the first place. I was digging myself a hole.
Right.
So to have a month off, knowing, okay, I'm going to have work, I have that job, right? Because at that point I was like, backup plan, like, Lindsey, you good? Like, and we'll fast forward to
I'm alive.
what I ended up doing, right? Because, but yeah, that was February.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a month off and it was great. Kind of a nice reset, especially from the place we were working at. It was just not healthy. It took a toll on us, and it was just, yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was not good, and
gave us COVID.
Yeah, and I, I know there's a lot of people out there who are in that same situation. Like, yeah, you feel stuck, right? You got bills to pay. Like, that's a serious thing, in no way, no means. Like, you got to work for a living because that's the world we live in, right? But if you're not happy, you're not happy, right? And that was probably one of the greater decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Having another job lined up, one, but then, giving myself the freedom to leave, right? And Lindsey's decision, there was some very stressful and concerning moments of conversation that we had, right? But now looking back on it, I'm sure she'd attest to that being one of the best decisions she's ever made.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, hands down. Like I said earlier, if it's taught me that, if I'm unhappy somewhere, I don't have to stay there. I will be able to find a new job. It might take me a while. It took me 4 months to find a new job. I was doing a lot of different things to make money on the side to pay my bills and stuff.
Hustle.
Yeah,
what
side
were you saying
hustles.
about side hustles?
Side hustles.
We stand for side hustles, but not everything, right?
Well, it really taught me that, I'm more resilient than I gave myself credit for. Right? I figured it out. I figured out how to pay my bills for 4 months without having, an actual 9-to-5 standard job.
Well, also, kind of lessen some expenses, lessen some of the frou-frou-ness, right, that you maybe didn't necessarily need.
Yeah.
Kind of, get down to the basics. It's yo.
Yeah, learning, what I actually needed.
Gotta cover my 4 walls. This is what I need to survive.
Right. and like figuring out like what it is you actually need to survive. Like what is your bare minimum living situation, right? You need food, you need a place to sleep that is safe and dry.
Transportation.
You need transportation sometimes too, you know? Like, you know, everything else can kind of wait sometimes, especially if you're in a situation to where you have the ability to kind of sort of make a living. And I was driving for DoorDash, and where we live currently, that is very much a viable means of income. And that sufficed up until it started to get like super hot and I couldn't really do it anymore because I didn't have AC in my car and I couldn't afford to get it fixed because I was living paycheck to paycheck still. And that's when I found the job that I have now, which I absolutely love. For the most part. Everything has its ups and downs. However, I will say that it is probably as close as I've come to my ideal job. Compared to where I've been, and I had to put this in perspective for myself the other day because it was a rough day and I was having a moment and I was hating everything and I had to kind of sit myself down and give myself an adult talk and say, listen, look at how far you've come, look into the jobs that you've previously had, and think about how previous you would view current you being upset about the job that you have now. I get to work from home. I get to have pretty decent autonomy. I don't have to really, I mean, I do have to abide by a schedule of like 8 to 5, but as long as I get my tasks done during the day, nobody's really policing me about like when I need to be doing them. So, yeah, it could be a lot worse. I do have a very, and I do recognize that I do have a very good job. My supervisor's awesome. I would do anything for that woman. We're very good friends. My coworkers are great. It's the customer service aspect that I really don't like, but that's something that I've learned about myself is I'm very good at customer service, but I hate it. You know, and that's something that you got to learn. But you know, it quitting my last job just out of the blue just taught me my own resilience. And it was definitely like the best decision for my mental health at the time. And don't get me wrong, it was hard and it was nerve-wracking, and there were days where I was like, I've made a terrible decision. I've made an egregious mistake. But yeah, you know, you come out the other side of it, learning more about yourself, and here we are now.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's important, you know, because if you never did that, you wouldn't be where you're at now.
Right. Absolutely. Learned lots of good life lessons.
And so, like, for me, I started that job, and it was great, you know. I mean, people were great, you know, and I was going through training, and you know, it was a sales job, so loved that. There was a lot of potential, you know. But as I got into it, it was not. It was not what I
thought you'd signed up for.
Thought I signed up for, right? There was a lot of those, right? Which, yeah, I mean, at the time, was in a hard spot, right? Because I was trying to get out of the toxic environment, right, that we were in, and it was a bad position, right? So when you're applying and interviewing and doing all that, it's hard because, you know, not to say I took the first job I got, but it was, you know, it was one of the first few, right? And so it didn't really leave much room to have options, right? Because you're like, well, I need to get out, right? I need to get out. I need to get somewhere else, right? And which I did, right? And for first couple months it was great, but then it was just like not, you know, and it was a sales type role, so there was a ton of pressure, you know, pressure to perform, and the nature of the job and what I was doing, it was just very, 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 very aggressive, and it, couldn't get behind it, right? What we were doing and such, and so it was difficult, and I struggled a lot because I was now just, that was his job too. They had a minimum 45 hours that I had to work, but obviously, we were going well beyond that. And it wasn't even the busy season, right? There was 50, 55 hours a week. Yes, working from home, but it's like ball and chain to my desk, right? And it just felt exhausting, and I hated it. Yeah, I was making great money, which is where I was really torn, right? Because I'm like, well, I have a wedding to pay for, I have this, right? All these things, trying to get out of debt, all that. But I was like, yo, I hated it. It was killing me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I cannot do this. Now, being with what Lindsey was going through, right? And she did it, right? I mean, I can't say that if I hadn't seen her go through that experience, right, and know, yeah, DoorDash in this area is pretty great, right? It's doable. Like, it's hard. It's difficult because you have to earn every single dollar you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's hard to kind of stay motivated on it, right? But it came to a point where it was a very difficult decision, and I had to talk to Jess about it, right? And we'd many nights of just, what the heck, like, but I don't know, I just felt this kind of peace about it, and I left. I was like, yo, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to give into this anymore. I'm going to get my life back. I'm going to get my time back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you think of, we were exhausted a couple years ago, right? Working 40 hours a week at the call center, the university, right? Here I was working 15 hours over that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Your regular 8 to 5, you feel exhausted. I was like 8 to 6, 6 days. Like, it was just like, it was exhausting. And it was, again, that piece. I was making great money, but didn't have time to spend it. Nor did I have the bandwidth mentally to deal with that.
It's also part of the reason why we did stop doing the podcast, because
so
you were
through
working,
all that, I was just like, nope, there's no sake of willpower.
You were working so much, and your work schedule was opposite mine.
Yeah, because I would get off, and then Lindsey would be dinner shift, and it was just, there was a span where we didn't see each other for a couple weeks, months at a time, and so I was like, this sucks, and I made the decision and left my job.
For a second time.
For a second time, this time with no plan. Yes, I'd submitted quite a bit of applications at that point, but at that point had not secured employment like I'd previously done, and that was the first time in my life, just like Lindsay had experienced, that was the first time in my life I'd done it. Looking back, best decision ever. In the moment, terrifying. I was like, oh, God. Here Jess and I, we'd gotten married in March, had our ceremony in September. That was coming up. So I was like, got to pay for my wedding. Like, thankfully, we've spaced it out, and we, chunked out our savings and stuff, right? We'd had enough time to save quite a bit, right? And doing that, right? So it helped a ton, but it put a lot of pressure and stress on there because I was like, there was many times when I was like, this was a terrible decision. Like, I should probably, right? But, looking back at it, I was just like, there's no way I could have stayed, what it was taking out of me, right? It just was, it was too much, and through that time, DoorDashing full time. It was great. It was very hard, but I enjoyed being on my own time, on my own schedule. If I wanted to bring her lunch at work, right, I can do so. If I wanted to, do things during the day, I could. right? It became difficult, right? Because with DoorDash, there's certain shifts and certain times of day, right? Your dinner rushes, when things settle down and people normally settle in for the night, right? And you kind of kick it, eat some dinner, and watch some Netflix, right? Then it's like, oh, that's the busy time, so I got to go do that. So it was weird getting used to it. But the thing that I really enjoyed about it is it now freed up my time, right? And now I had actual time to apply for jobs that I actually wanted, and it wasn't like applying for jobs to get out of a previous job to then jump into a job that you don't really, you're like, there may have been some red flags, there may have been some things, but like I wanted to get out so bad that you jump into it, and then you're like, wow, this sucks. And I couldn't keep jumping. Right? So for the first time, it actually allowed me to have freedom to be able to apply for jobs, interview, actually have, hey, when are you available this week? Well, you had availability, right? I could DoorDash in between. It worked out very well. I had tons and tons and tons of interviews, tons and tons and tons of, applications flying out and everything. And I could, it was interesting. I was having like 3 to 4 interviews a day, right? For a span of a couple weeks, it was, granted that in and of itself is exhausting, right? Because I'm just the type of person that's just that way. But it was nice to be able to have options. And through that process, I had gotten several job offers, seriously contemplating each of them. But it was like, you know what? Something doesn't feel right? I'm going to say no to this one because I can, right? And to have other options, to have and to truly be in a situation like that, it led me to the company I'm with now, right? Great company. One of the top companies in the United States. Like, if I wouldn't have done that, not saying that, you should just go out and just piece out of your job.
Yeah.
But just to show, it's just like you said, right? That we live in a world, especially as things are opening, and have opened back up and the hiring surges and everything of the workforce. Like at its core, I'm pretty sure we've talked about it before on podcasts. It's like, look, you can always get another job.
Oh yeah, and
but you can never get your time back.
Yeah, it might take some time.
It took me about 2 months from that point. So yours was 4 months, mine was 2 months. But yeah, it could be sooner, could be longer.
I think the main takeaway, because I do recognize that like being able to quit your job like that does come from a place of privilege. Like I did have like some savings that I could rely on. I did have like I'd paid off a majority of my credit cards, so I could, if things really happened poorly for me, I could fall back on that. And I do recognize that that is a place of privilege. Like I know that that is not like a norm for everyone, but I think the main takeaway from that everybody can kind of take away from that situation, I guess, is taking a chance on yourself. If you're unhappy in a place, especially a place of work where you're spending a majority of your time, it's not the end of the world. You don't have to stay there. And it might feel like you have to stay there because it's comfortable, it's what you've always known, or it's terrifying to have to go look for something else and it feels like a lot of work and it feels like it's not worth it. But I promise you, looking for something that is different and something that you actually want to do is 100% worth it. Because, we all only have the amount of time that we have. Again, like I said before, like we are never going to get more time in this world. And you have to figure out, like, is what you're spending your time on worth it for you? I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing right now. If you think that anything that you're doing is not worth your time, stop doing it. Figure out a way, make a plan, to stop doing that thing that is no longer worth your time and no longer worth your effort, because you'll be able to sink that time into something that is worth your effort and is worth your time and is going to make you happy. And that's really what it's about at the end of the day, is your happiness and your ability to save your mental health and to do things that you actually want to do.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. But yeah, just to reframe, and we know by no means they'll be like, yeah, I heard this on a podcast, so I got it,
Oh, please don't.
Don't use that as your letter of resignation.
Don't do what we did.
There was a lot of thought and consideration that went into that. Hard conversations with my wife, and luckily Lindsey, she had conversations with herself, right? And
had to talk to my dog.
Bouncing back and forth.
Had to ask him if he was
but
ready to join the
workforce.
workforce.
There's a lot. It wasn't just like, yo, I'm gonna peace out, and then next day, no, like it's just not
right.
Didn't happen like that, and it like she said, definitely came from, being in a spot, right, kind of with budgeting and things like that, to where, kind of had a little bit of a grip on the money and had some savings and stuff. So definitely, that makes it a lot harder, if you don't have that, because then you're really kind of, but then again, right, I mean, you kind of challenge yourself, right? There's no complacency in that, right? Because you're like, look, we got to eat, like, and it does a lot for you, right? It kind of tests you and puts you to the limit, and shows you what you're capable of, right? That kind of resiliency thing to it. But the biggest piece, right, is if we never took those risks, we wouldn't be in the situations we are right now with the companies we're with, right? In a lot better situation, and I wouldn't have, if I would have stayed in that job, right, not only was I working 55 hours a week, because that was the thing I was thinking about, right? How do I even apply for a job and have time to interview if I'm already taking up majority of my week? Right, I had no time to be able to actually go through it, right? And, like, that was the hardest part. So I had to make that decision, right, based on that, right? Yes, it did work out in its favor, but it was very difficult, right? I mean, DoorDash was interesting, and it was great. Thankful for it, right? If those of you that have the opportunity to do it, it's awesome. You can make money on your own schedule. It's tough because, you got to earn every single dollar you're doing, right? But those you can do it, go for it, But yeah, so through all that, it was too hard, too much, too hard, and time conflicts and schedules and stuff that, distance us from being able to be in a position where we could continue the podcast, right? And also financially, there's finances involved, right, with
the podcast is not free, okay?
Sustaining and recording and uploading and all of that, right? There's a lot of that went into it. But now, we're so stoked to bring it back because now, through all that experience and such, it's just brought so much more meaning and taken it back to why we started it in the first place. And we really want to simplify it down and just let things happen. So, one of my favorite parts to each episode is the quote. Today's quote, I don't believe it has an owner. Found this on the good old Google.
The good old Goog.
The Goog. It says, the more you try to control something, the more it controls you. Free yourself and let things take their own natural course.
It's very true. Because I think that's literally what we did, right? Is we freed ourselves and we'll kind of throwing caution to the wind, more or less, and letting the chips fall where they may. But it works out in the end, you know, because you figure out what you're truly capable of. You figure out, like, you know, I am willing to work for this. I am willing to put in the time and the effort that it takes to actually make a living. I was just so miserable in my last job, or I was so miserable doing what I was doing before, that it puts into perspective what your time is truly worth. So, moral of the story is, don't force things, don't put pressure on things, but, you know, remember that you are resilient and that you will get through whatever difficult time you're going through right now. And 5 years from now, even 6 months from now, even 8 months from now, you're going to look back and you're going to say, like, wow, I really came I've come so far from where I used to be, that, you know, it's crazy to look back on. Progress is good.
Yeah, and I think the piece to it too, free yourself and let things take their own natural course. Like, yeah, it worked out well for us, you know. And I mean, don't get us wrong, like, she kind of mentioned, you know, those pieces to our jobs now. It's not saying, like, now, great, like, changed my life.
Oh, it's not perfect by any means.
And no, not at all, right? There's still, you know, like, I wouldn't say I'm in my dream job by any means, right? I'm not where I want to be long term, right? But I'm where I'm supposed to be right now, right? It's the next best thing. It's the next right thing, you know, for me, and grateful for that. Because if I would have never taken that chance, wouldn't have ended up here, wouldn't have learned, and who knows if we would have brought the podcast back, right? Like, it's just those kind of things. So it's kind of just letting things kind of take their own course, right? Just kind of letting it be. You know, and freeing yourself could look many different ways. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job. Like, if you love your job, great. If you're happy with it, great. You know, but if it's something that's like, you know, slaving away and it's just eating away at you, you know, maybe it's time to consider what something else would look like, right? Because it's been, you know, it's been taking away from your happiness, your mental health, your time. I mean, that's the biggest thing, time. Like,
yeah,
you know, for me, it was like, 55 hours, 60 hours a week that was too much time. That was too much of my time being given away. And
yeah, you can't.
I was never going to get that back.
Yeah, you can't spend your time being miserable. Can't do it. Life is too short.
That indeed. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We so grateful, you know, for this opportunity to be able to record again, and we're looking forward to it. Absolutely. We hope everybody's continuing to stay safe out there in this crazy world that we live in. Appreciate, you know, wherever you guys consume this content. Go ahead, like it, punch it, hit it, whatever you want to do. Share it, you know. If this made any sense to you, we would love to, you know, if you shared it. If you're like, what in the heck are these people talking about?
Welcome to our
Great.
world. We don't
know.
You
know, we're just rolling through it, right? You know, and maybe it's not for you. But if this made any sort of impact, we'd love to hear about it, you know. And we're excited to kind of continue to journey together again, you know, and chat through things and talk through things, because it's had such an impact on our lives. And so we appreciate those that are listening, and tune in next time for another episode of The Disconnect.